Greetings, programs. Welcome to a new segment on my YouTube channel. It's called It's On Like Tron. While I wasn't a big fan of the original 1982 Tron, when I went to see Tron Legacy in 2010, I had my Star Wars A New Hope theatrical experience. See, I had heard for years and years from people who had gone to see the original Star Wars movie in 1977 and how it wasn't just a good film, it wasn't just a fun movie, it was an experience, one that they never ever forgot. And while I've seen a lot of great movies throughout my life, I think Tron Legacy was one of those films where when I was finished, I just slumped in my seat and I was flabbergasted and gobsmacked. I didn't just feel as though I had seen a cool movie with great effects and one of my favorite actors, Jeff Bridges. I felt like I watched something that transcended films. Now, I don't go to the theater much these days, and in 2010, I rarely ever saw a movie more than once, but Tron Legacy I went to see 3 times. It's something that really resonated with me, really connected with it, really got me right in the feels. And when it came out on Blu-ray, I watched it again, and once again, it had an equally powerful effect. I had seen it a couple more times over the years, but I hadn't seen it for about 2 years now. So this past week, I just popped it in, and I was a little apprehensive because I knew how much I loved it, how passionate I was about this movie in years gone by, and I wasn't sure if I was going to be all that excited about it again. I am a little older now, a little more tired, and some of the older films that I was really excited about, I still enjoy them, but I'm not quite as pumped about them. Well, I'm happy to say that just a few minutes into Tron Legacy, I had a smile from ear to ear. I found the latest viewing just as immersive as every other viewing had been. And watching it again has really reinvigorated my passion for Tron. Now, unfortunately, there isn't much Tron stuff going on these days. The animated series, Tron Uprising, didn't get renewed for a second season. There's no video games on the horizon, no comic books. Tron seems like a dead property, and that actually really appeals to me. See, I was also a very big Star Wars fan, and I am completely burned out on Star Wars at this point. Eventually I will see the new movies as they come out, but my days of going on opening night are over, or even a couple weeks after. My days of going to the theater at all for Star Wars movies are over. It's just sort of I'll get to it when I get to it, sort of like I did with Batman vs. Superman, which I saw 2 years after it came out. I'm very much against the more mentality, M-O-A-R, of constantly needing more and more product, more movies, more books, more comics. And I'm starting to really appreciate finite properties. And I like the fact that Tron is finite, that it is 2 films, a spectacular animated series with 1 season, and a comic book. A couple of games in there as well, but I think less is more, and I think the less Tron there is, the more we can appreciate what little Tron there is. And Tron Legacy is definitely a movie that I appreciate every single time I watch it. One of my major complaints about the new Star Wars trilogy was that it felt like there was a missing movie, and they filled in a few of the gaps in the books and in the video games, and I just can't stand that. 5 minutes into Tron Legacy, literally, I paused it, I checked the runtime, and I turned to my wife and I said, we're 5 minutes in and we're completely caught up. It feels like there's a missing movie here. The original Tron took place in 1982, but a lot of the events that set up this movie took place in 89. Well, there was no 89 Tron movie, so they fill in the gap with a fantastic flashback that goes back to 1989. We get some important scenes between Kevin Flynn and his son as a boy, and also some news clippings, news updates to bring us up to speed on what happened. And I just literally had to stop and savor that a director, a film company gave us 5 minutes of flashbacks in order to get us up to speed, instead of just completely dropping us in the middle of the deep end and saying, oh, you don't know what's going on? Tough. Well, you can read the book or the comic afterward. I think it's disrespectful to audiences to do that to them, and it's completely oblivious to the fact that it ruins a good film viewing experience. If you're confused and bewildered, you're not going to enjoy the movie. If you're brought up to speed, if you're given these important little setup things, then the rest of the story is going to flow and it's going to feel like a proper circle or disc by the end of the movie. Now, it's all about the grid for me, but I really appreciate that even before we hit the grid, there's some really beautifully shot scenes before leading up to that. We get a scene of Sam Flynn on the Ducati motorcycle chase, which is beautifully shot. The cinematography is fantastic. It really reminds me a lot of The Dark Knight in its feel, its atmosphere, and its style. So that foreshadows Sam Flynn on a light cycle later on in the film. And then when Sam jumps off the building with his parachute, that's also foreshadowing later on when he jumps off of a tower in the grid using, it's not really a parachute, it's one of the Blackguard's, kind of looks like wasp wings in order to slow his fall down. Now, I said I wasn't a huge fan of the original Tron, but I am a fan of when filmmakers treat the source material that they're working off of with love and reverence. And the scene where Sam enters Flynn's old arcade always gives me goosebumps. I love seeing the old arcade, the old Flynn's arcade sign, the machines, and the music playing by the Eurythmics. Sweet Dreams is just the perfect song for that. And speaking of music, I'm going to mention it now before I forget. Daft Punk has taken the music to another level. This is not a score. This is not a soundtrack. This is just as important as what you see. This is not garnish, spices for the steak. This is what makes a lot of what's in the movie work for me. They're not just cool, catchy beats. Daft Punk gives the grid its sound, its literal soundtrack. Now, there's a lot of movies around that time and even to this day that imitate that sound, that big, loud, drawn-out horn that you hear in Tron Legacy. But they don't seem to know when to use it all the time. In Tron, it's used right. It's the feeling, the atmosphere, the mood of the grid. It's this beautiful lit up environment, but it's dangerous too. So despite how pretty everything looks, Daft Punk never lets you forget that there is a very serious element of danger in this environment. The movie really takes off when Sam Flynn downloads into the grid. Every time that happens, that to me feels like such an immersive instant moment. A lot of movies, it takes a while to get into the flow, but when he downloads into the grid, I feel like I'm in the grid. All of a sudden, everything looks different. It sounds different. It smells different. It's such a unique environment. I just love it. It's like a meshing of Zen and Mad Max's Wasteland. A perfect blend of order and chaos. So the visual effects in this movie are absolutely stunning. I love the costume designs, how the costumes all light up. The light cycle battle is outstanding. Same with the light jet battle later on in the movie. I mentioned the soundtrack is other level stuff. I love the acting in the movie too. I thought everybody did a fantastic job. Jeff Bridges is one of my favorite actors, and it was awesome seeing him again as Kevin Flynn. One of the most common criticisms is that he was playing the dude. And I think most people who say that should probably watch 82 Tron again, because I think Jeff Bridges was being true to the original Kevin Flynn characterization. Instead of just because I'm old, I'm Shakespearean now. No, Kevin Flynn was a, hey man, watch it dude type of guy. So I appreciate that despite how long Kevin Flynn has been in the grid, and in the grid, our minutes are hours or days to them. So he's actually been in there a lot longer than the 20 years that it feels like he's been in there. I like the fact that while he is a very different character now, he's very Zen, very Buddhist. You're messing with my Zen thing, man. Even though he's evolved in that respect, I like that he still retains that, hey man, I'm a video game dude aspect to his character. And I don't think he is to the extreme of the dude. I don't even think he's really all that much like the dude, other than some of the verbiage and the Buddhist thing. I think he's closer to the Kevin Flynn of the 82 Tron movie. Another one of the most common criticisms is the effect of Clue. Now, yes, I agree that that one shot, everybody knows that one shot they use of the de-aged Jeff Bridges at the beginning of the movie when he's leaving his son's bedroom. Yeah, it does look bad. And that should have been shot differently. I would have shot it in a lot more shadow. Left it a little more mysterious when they were using it for the actual real Kevin Flynn. But I'm able to compartmentalize, and I've never been one to let little things, quick things, ruin an entire movie for me. I think that's what happens with a lot of people. They see an effect, they can't get over it, and it takes them right out of the movie. This movie is so immersive for me, nothing can take me out of it. And that is one of the things that proves that I cannot be taken out of Tron Legacy, because it is just too immersive. It's too well done. So I get over that very quickly at the beginning of the movie, and then when it's used for Clue throughout the movie, I love it. I have no problem whatsoever for it, because Clue is a program, he is artificial, and he is unnatural. He shouldn't be. He's a mistake, which Kevin Flynn eventually realizes. And so I think anything that other people would criticize about that particular effect of the de-aging of Kevin Flynn, of Jeff Bridges, I think it works. It works perfectly. I think Garrett Hedlund does a great job as Sam Flynn too. It's always such a daunting task when you are cast as the offspring of a legendary movie character. Sometimes the actors can go in a completely different direction and say, this is my character, I'm going to put my own spin on it. I like what Garrett Hedlund did with the character here. Sam Flynn isn't too far off from Kevin Flynn in the original movie, but he's also got like a cool classic Hollywood star vibe to him. I thought he reminded me a lot of a young Clint Eastwood. If you've ever seen Clint on Rawhide, that's really what Sam Flynn reminds me of in this movie. He's a bit of a brat, he's a bit of a braggart, but he's also laid back, he's cool, he doesn't take himself too seriously. He's just laconic, and I always appreciate seeing laconic actors. Actors who have the don't just do something, stand there mentality like Clint Eastwood has employed his entire life. And how about the program that fights for the users? Bruce Boxleitner is back as Alan Bradley, bookending the movie, but he's also in the grid. Not that much, though. There's a fantastic flashback where they've de-aged Bruce Boxleitner, similar to how they de-aged Jeff Bridges. So we see just a quick glimpse of Tron in action. But for the most part, he is in this film as Rinzler, the repurposed drone of Clue. And I just loved Rinzler in this movie. Very Vader-like, the hero who has become the villain. And even though he is a henchman for Clue for most of the movie, he doesn't feel evil. He just feels as though he's been corrupted. He feels damaged. And I guess that's why it didn't bother me as much. So one of the biggest criticisms about Rinzler in this movie is that he turns too quick. He flies over Kevin Flynn, and then all of a sudden he has a change of heart, and he crashes into Clue, and he becomes a good guy. And it never bothered me, because he never felt that evil to me. He felt like he was corrupted, and it felt like he was on the brink the entire time. He doesn't kill Sam Flynn in the arena. He doesn't do anything overly cruel. He isn't like Vader, just randomly killing people here and there. I don't know, it just felt like deep down he was still Tron, and just seeing Kevin Flynn would have been enough to jog him. And also, being a computer program, even though it's mere seconds for him, it could feel like days or years while he's processing the information, the emotions. I don't know, there's so much nitpicking that goes on with this movie that I just can't do, because it's such a ridiculous idea that I buy into. It's a computer world filled with people who look like human beings, who walk around and wear clothes and behave like humans. And much like the animated series reboot, I just buy into it, and I love it. So that's why these little real world nitpicks, they don't even register with me, because, well, it's like nitpicking an episode of He-Man. I mean, if you're in it, if you're in the world, if you're really immersed in it, then you're in it, and a lot of rules don't apply once you're in it. That's the difference between something like Tron and a comic book movie. Those comic book superheroes are in the real world, dealing with real world physics and situations and people. Whereas the grid is the grid. It has a different set of rules, and it gets a pass from me on a lot of the things that other people can't seem to get past. So the visual effects are great, the music is off the charts, the acting is great, but none of that matters if it doesn't have the right story. And it's the story that really hits home with me every single time. I like that when you break this down, it is a family story. It is the story of a father and his two sons. And in a lot of ways, this is kind of a biblical story. Kevin Flynn being the god who created the grid, and then there's Clue, who he created in his image, similar to God creating Adam in his image. But then you have the other son, which is a whole different element, Sam Flynn, who is Kevin Flynn's biological son, which you can relate to God's Son, Jesus Christ. So I think whether you're religious or not, it's an interesting story to see how the character of Kevin Flynn, who created all of this, deals with two of his creations. And it's not just two sons, which has been done a lot. This is something different, because this is a biological son who was created out of love with his wife. And then there's Clue, who is a clone, who is him. When a parent looks at their child, they see a lot of themselves in the child. But when Kevin Flynn looks at Clue, he sees exactly himself. And what's compelling about the story is that he sees his mistakes from the past as well. So the movie is filled with all sorts of great action. There's chasing around. But I really like the idea behind Kevin Flynn sitting it out. It's the decisions that they made in Tron Legacy that go against the grain that I appreciate. There's so many movies today where audiences just want one character to fight another character. And they don't ask why should these two characters be fighting. They just want to see them fight. It's like Batman versus Superman. They just wanted to see them fight, and no one stopped to ask, well, why should they? What's the reason behind it? And my warning before that movie came out was, if there isn't a good reason, you're going to leave feeling empty. And a lot of audience members left that theater feeling not satisfied, because it's not enough. It's not enough to just do a dream match. And that's what they're doing in too many comic book movies. They've also done it in Star Wars movies of the past, where Yoda fought Dooku or Yoda fought the Emperor. And there's just no reason for it. I personally would much rather see a discussion, some sort of debate, I don't know, some sort of battle that you can't see, an intangible battle, a force battle, instead of jumping around, flipping in lightsabers, or in these superhero movies like Captain America, Civil War, where these heroes are just clashing with each other, throwing fists. I really appreciate the fact that in Tron Legacy, instead of Kevin Flynn waging war against the evil forces of Clue, he sits it out. He removes himself from the situation. It's very Zen, it's very Buddhist, and I understand how a lot of audience members didn't dig it, because a lot of audience members don't dig Zen and Buddhism in their everyday life. It's crazy when you think about it, how many people have the power to change their lives in a positive way and they don't do it. And instead, they stick to the things that are making them unhealthy, unhappy, miserable. They could stop so many of the things that are the cause of their unhappiness, and they won't. They will not. They attract negativity into their lives. They want that fighting. They want that drama, the thrills. And that's not at all how I'm wired. So a story like Tron Legacy resonates with me because I appreciate the fact that Kevin Flynn, even though he has the power to fight, he chooses not to. He removes himself from the situation. That's what I also appreciated about the end of The Last Jedi, where a lot of people wanted to see Luke Skywalker doing flips, using his green lightsaber and kicking ass and being a badass. Much like Kevin Flynn in Tron Legacy, I appreciated a character who didn't want to fight anymore. He was just tired, and then when he had to fight, he fought in a non-violent way. Which brings me to the end of Tron Legacy. It is an absolute masterpiece. I can't believe that every time I watch it, it gets dusty in the room. You would think that after as many times as I've watched it, it wouldn't give me that warm fuzzy and affect me that much. But every single time I watch it, I'm overwhelmed with emotion because it's so beautifully written and again goes so against the grain. We have Kevin Flynn against Clue face to face, and even though a lot of people would clamor for a physical confrontation between the two, I savored it so much watching Kevin Flynn apologize to the villain of the movie. It's so against the norm, but it's so perfect for the film. You've got Kevin Flynn realizing the error of his ways, and he's evolved into something more than he was before. And unfortunately, his creation was not created to evolve. It's just a snapshot of him in time. And so it's pretty powerful watching Kevin Flynn swallow his pride, swallow his ego, and say, "This is on me." How often do you see a character in a movie, or in real life for that matter, take that kind of responsibility and accountability and say, "This is all on me, this is all my fault"? See, we want drama in movies. We want the hero versus fighting the villain. We want the hero fighting another hero. We just want fighting, fighting, fighting. And I loved a scene where the supposed hero is facing against the supposed villain, and things become a little more gray. And you have Clue saying, I did what you told me to do," and Kevin goes, "Yes, you did. You did it as you saw fit from your point of view." And apologizing to him. It's just so rare, so unique to have that much empathy for your enemy, especially when it's your creation. And then the final part that pushes me over the edge is where Kevin is telling his son to go, but it's very subtle. But if you're looking very closely, if you're looking for the details, it's so brilliantly written or acted. I don't know if it's Jeff Bridges adding things in or just reading from the script, but it could be a very sad or bittersweet moment, but it's so, for me, overwhelmingly positive and powerful and beautiful. It's such a beautiful moment because instead of "hurry, go before you get killed," Kevin Flynn is yelling things like, "Yes, it's time!" It's the culmination. Another reason why it's so powerful for me is because to me it appears as though it's the culmination of the self-actualization of the character of Kevin Flynn. How often do you see a character reach that top of the pyramid of Maslow's hierarchy of needs and become an enlightened being? And that's what I feel happens in this movie. Kevin Flynn doesn't betray his ideals and his virtues. He sticks to his ideals. He does what he needs to in order to ensure that his son escapes safely, but he reintegrates with Clue. And again, I mentioned those little small touches, those little details. Watch when Kevin Flynn reintegrates with Clue. He embraces him. So it isn't a confrontational thing. It's not painful. Clue certainly doesn't seem to be enjoying the experience, but Jeff Bridges is sure to, with his body language, convey that he is embracing his son, his creation, himself in a way. There's a lot that you can read between the lines in this film, and I think that's why I love it so much, why I can watch it so many times, and why it can resonate with me so deeply and powerfully every time I watch it. So Tron Legacy might just seem like a flashy effects movie to you, but if you have the right way to watch it in a very immersive environment with surround sound on a home projector, so that you can feel like you're part in the grid, part of the journey, following along with Sam Flynn, instead of just being a simple effects movie, I think this can be a really fulfilling ride. So that's my look back at Tron Legacy. I'm going to be taking a look at much more Tron stuff in the future. I'll be looking at that prequel comic, Tron Betrayal. And I've said in the past that I don't like it when movie studios withhold information from you and make you read the book or the comic. Tron Betrayal is not information that you need to enjoy Tron Legacy. It's interesting information, and that's my favorite type of movie-related book or video game or comic. It's stuff that isn't vital. It's just interesting. If you don't ever read it, it's not like it's going to take away from your enjoyment of the film. And I'll also be taking a look at the exceptional animated series Tron Uprising. only lasted for one season, but it is an absolute masterpiece. It has so many of the great elements of Tron Legacy, and it has Bruce Boxleitner as Tron himself. And who knows, down the road, I might even get the opportunity to talk to some of the people who were behind creating Tron. It would be amazing to speak to Bruce Boxleitner, some of the other voice actors, but more than that, some of the creative people behind Tron. Actors add a lot to these characters. They help create them and bring life and bring heart and soul. But there's a lot of unsung heroes behind the camera, and a lot of them you never even find out their names. So it would be amazing to speak to some of the animators, writers of Uprising and the Tron movies. And of course, it would be Tron-tastic to speak to the man who has carried the Tron torch. Is it a torch? The Tron light stick? Tron Guy. And I wouldn't just talk to him about Tron. I think one of the most interesting topics to talk to him about would be how to be a completely bold and confident cosplayer. There are far too many people in this world who get offended far too easily. I'm a firm believer that getting offended is not an accomplishment, and I just dig Tron Guy's style, where he loves what he loves, and a lot of people have tried to make fun of him, and he just won't have any of it. And he's not the type of person who will curl up in a ball and cry. He puffs his chest out and he says, "This is what I love." And I'll tell you what, it is absolutely wrong to try to steal another person's joy. It is absolutely wrong to do that. And he is one of the people who reminds people that it's wrong to do that. And time again, when people try to belittle him for being passionate about what he's passionate about, I always see a turn happen where these people become a little bit self-aware and they realize, this guy is just loving what he loves, and everybody loves what they love, and no one should be made to feel bad about that. So I like that Tron Guy stands up to these people with grace, though. He's not belligerent. He doesn't sink to other people's level. He does it in a very classy, graceful way. So my hat's off to Tron Guy for the way he deals with that, and I think that would be an interesting conversation. He's been laying low for a while. I'm not sure how to get a hold of him, so if you know how to get in touch with Tron Guy, definitely let me know, because he seems to be off the grid lately. Tron Guy, where are you now? So that's my look at Tron Legacy. A lot more Tron discussion to come. No, it doesn't seem like there's going to be any more Tron stuff coming out. No new plans for a new movie or comics or games, and I'm completely fine with that. I'm really enjoying finite properties, things that don't have an infinite number of things coming out that are impossible to keep up with and just keep diluting and watering down everything else before it. So if you're a big Tron fan and you thought Tron was off, think again. It's on like Tron. Got a comment about Tron Legacy? Scroll down and go to town. And to join the tribe, hit subscribe. Tron must stay.